Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Welcome to So That Just Happened, a podcast for those who have lost their person and want to find themselves. I'm Carly Cooper, a single mom, widow, coach, author, and chronic truth seeker. My superpower is finding the funny, the hope, and the silver lining in any shit situation. This podcast is for the purpose of education only and is not a replacement for therapy. If you need additional support, please seek out a trained professional for help with your specific situation. Let's get to it, shall we? Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of So That Just Happened. This is actually going to be my last episode for a little bit. I will come back, but I am in the deep trenches of creation of my online program that I've talked about called Rekindle Your Life. And I've set a deadline for myself for February. Thank God it's a leap year because I may be launching it towards the end of February now because there's just a shit ton of work to do that I didn't necessarily anticipate. I kind of knew, but I think I was in a little bit of denial. Anyway, all that to say is that I need to really put my head down and focus and get all the things done to get this program ready for you. And I'm really proud of it. And I also know myself that I need to really focus and manage my time in a way that will get it done. So I'm going to put the podcast on hold for now to just really focus on that. That said, this will be the last episode that I do for a while, and it's, I think, a good one to end on. It's an interview that I did back in June with an organization, incredible organization called High Lifeline, and they interviewed me, and I think it was a really good conversation, and I hope that it inspires you. I hope that it leaves you thinking, or even if you can share it with somebody who is struggling with their own grief, or loss or anything, where they could use some guidance and inspiration. So give it a listen and know that I will be coming back at some point. But I just need to really focus right now. So I just want to tell you a little bit more about this incredible organization. High Lifeline Canada's mission is to meet the social, emotional, and practical needs of children, families, and communities impacted by illness, trauma, and loss. They are an incredible organization doing some incredible work. And to learn more about supporting this meaningful cause, you can visit highlifelinecanada.org and make a donation. And I really hope you do, because they are helping a lot of people get through some of the toughest times of their lives. So I hope that you enjoy this interview, and I will see you back on the podcast real soon.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another amazing episode of On Air with Chai. I'm your host, Brian Strasberg, and today my guest host is one Jennifer Gelberger, who is our Toronto-based case manager. Hi, Jen.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. I know you guys tend to have very busy schedules with clients and in and out of the hospital all day, so I do appreciate you carving out an hour to spend with us. Today's conversation is a bit different than usual. We aren't going to be talking about cancer or children today. Today's conversation is going to be focused on our guest's experience with a major loss in a pretty tragic way. Our guest today is a mindset coach, an essential oil educator, a speaker, and author of Balance the Mother Load, Reinvent Your Life in Just 8 Weeks. And she's also the creator and host of an incredible podcast called So That Just Happened. Carly Cooper, welcome.
Hello.
And thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and all that you have to share with us.
Well, don't thank me yet. But I appreciate you reaching out.
Absolutely. I've been listening to your podcast. It's very different than normal stuff I listen to. I'm generally listening to golf stuff or Mind Be Alex breakdown. So it kind of, it hits the same tone as that one, but from your point of view and from being a life coach, you kind of add a whole different degree to what you've been through. So do you mind if we go back a little bit and just tell us your story and how you ended up starting this podcast?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the short version because, I'm old, but, yeah. So I basically all my life, I look back to when I was a teenager, I was always into personal growth, mindset. I don't know. I should say, I don't know why, but my dad and my mom, they were always like that, very positive. My dad would read Brian Tracy and Anthony Robbins at the time. And I just always was interested in that. And, cut to, I go to university. I don't like it. I study things that I don't really, I'm not doing now. And, I was in advertising for a little bit. I tried the corporate world, couldn't do it, found out it was my kryptonite. And when I had my son, when I was 32, that was around the time that The Secret came out. And it was in 2006. And I was at a crossroads and I was just like, what am I supposed to do with my life? I had tried all these different things, party planning and, a bunch of different things. And it's like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Like, just God, give me a sign. And sure enough, the next day I was watching breakfast television just to check the weather, and Bob Proctor was on. And he is one of the, he's a guru in personal growth and development and mindset stuff. And he was talking all about The Secret and the law of attraction and mindset stuff. And I was like hanging on his every word. And then that day I was watching Oprah and she also had a bunch of life coaches on and spiritual teachers, and they were talking about The Secret. And I just felt like, okay, this is my sign, because I felt like I was home. I felt like they were speaking my language. I felt like I had this understanding and was like hanging on everything that they said. And so, long story short, I decided to become a life coach. And through that, it's been 16 years. Through that journey, my focus has changed. In the beginning, I was a life coach for new moms because I was a new mom and I felt like I had something to say there. And then I moved into more of like mindset, law of attraction kind of stuff. And because I'm a big believer, I'm obsessed with energy and like positive energy and how to change and manipulate in a good way our energy to create and attract more of what we want. Because I believe we can't control everything, but we can have a hand in how we live our lives and how we choose to live our lives and how we choose to think and who we surround ourselves with. I think those are things that we can control to some degree. And I was just sort of like obsessed with figuring all that out for myself and then teaching it to others. And I was doing that for a very long time. And, I sprinkled in some other things, like I was an essential oil educator. And again, that's sort of changing the energy of our body and our mind through natural solutions. And so, and then, should I just jump in and tell you about the story, like my husband?
Whatever you feel comfortable doing.
So, I was doing that and building my business, and then, COVID hit, and it didn't really affect me and my business because I was always virtual. And it was actually, dare I say it, a good thing for my business because people were struggling from a mindset perspective. So it didn't affect my business, but it affected my husband's business, who was a camp director. And so camps completely shut down. There was a lot going on at that time. And my husband struggled for most of his adult life with depression. He had 4 concussions over that time. And, but he was somebody who did the work and he tried and he fought. And, he would have, I remember, I was with him for 27 years. We were married for 20. And over the course of our time together, he had like I don't want to say bad moments, but like really like low points, I would say maybe 3 times. And he always bounced back and he always came back. And so when he says like he suffered from depression, I was sort of like, I didn't dismiss it. Of course, I didn't dismiss it, but I was just like, I don't see him as being one of those people, who you hear about or you see, like, because he was a light, like he had a lot of life in him and he was very inspirational and very motivational and he was a leader and so even in his dark times, I still saw the light in him. So I never really, I guess, wrapped my head around the fact that he had depression from a mental health perspective. And so, like I said, COVID hit. His father was also at that time diagnosed with cancer and then died 4 months later. So that was tragic and fast. And my husband was like right in there and moved in the last 2 weeks and, really like took that on. And he was struggling with his own mental health stuff and, just the implications on everybody of COVID and then throw a bunch of other things on top of that. It just became just like this perfect storm. And then on May 20th of 2021, my husband took his life. And I can't say I didn't see it coming, but I didn't see it coming because if I look back, I could see, okay, sure, I guess. But I spoke to him that morning. My spidey senses did not go off. And I really believe that I am someone who is in tune and intuitive in that way. And I got no indication whatsoever that would be the last time I spoke to him. So, so I stopped working for a good 1.5 years. And, this podcast that I created, I didn't even really know or think that I was kind of working towards something because I was just doing my own work and my own healing. But I'm somebody who just naturally and innately wants to teach and share what I know. And so I basically took that time to really heal and do the work on top of the work that I had been doing for 30 plus years prior to that. And I was working with my own coach at the time, and I still am actually. And she was the one that planted this seed of a podcast because I said, I don't think I can go back to coaching people again. I am now, because of all of this and the trauma and the grief and on top of that, I'm an overly highly sensitive empath. So I take on other people's feelings and energy, even when I don't want to. And believe me, most of the time I don't want to. I just feel it hard. And I knew that something within me changed and I can't take on other people's stuff and let it go the way that I used to be able to. But I still wanted to be able to share and to teach and to help. So the podcast idea was born out of the thought that this is a way for me to teach and help and hopefully inspire and motivate while protecting my own energy and having it be more of a one-sided conversation than me having to help somebody through their own stuff and take that on. So I hope I answered your question somewhere in there.
No, you definitely did. I've been listening to the podcast and the guests and the conversations you have are fantastic. You really are open, you're honest, you're very transparent with everything. And I think a lot of people listening to it will be able to pull all of that out of the podcast itself. Questions though for you, how often, and again, if you're not comfortable answering these questions, by all means, just tell me next. How often do you replay that day in your head?
In the beginning, very often. But I do want to say that I did get EMDR therapy pretty much right away. And I always try and remember what it stands for. I think it stands for eye movement desensitization and repurposing or something like that. Google it, but it's EMDR. And it's specifically for grief and trauma. And I did that right away because I didn't want to replay the scene over and over and over again in my head because, for obvious reasons, it was traumatic. And I knew that now as a single mom, my son was 14 and a half at the time. I had 2 dogs, a house, all the things. I knew that I had to be strong and I had to get through this in the healthiest way possible. And I was okay to feel all the feelings, like the sadness, the anger, all of it, but I didn't want to feel scared and freaked out. And that's why, because I knew that emotion would paralyze me. All the other stuff may take me down for some time, but I would still be able to move forward. But I knew that fear can be so debilitating that I needed to desensitize that. And so that's why I chose that therapy, and it worked for me. And I know that it's worked amazing for so many other people who deal with grief and trauma. So definitely, if that's you, I would say check that form of therapy out. And so now I can replay it if I want to. I mean, not that I want to, but you know what I'm saying? If I needed to but it doesn't freak me out. It's more of just and it doesn't mean I don't feel it, but it's not in a way that scares me or stops me. It's a bit more of a matter of fact, okay, this is what it is. And, I thought about it a lot, but I decided not to think about I wanted to find more of the meaning and to try and find my own peace and my own closure around it rather than replaying the tragedy part of it. Right. I'm somebody who's always seeking for truth and for meaning. And would I say that I believe everything happens for a reason? Yes, to some degree, but I'm always trying to find a silver lining in every situation. And it doesn't come right away. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm always because I don't believe that things just happen randomly or that someone deserves this or they don't deserve that. I think that there's always something to learn from everything. And even if I just make it up and I'm just well, that's what it's going to be today. And right. Then that's good enough for me because I don't believe that things just happen in vain.
Right. Do you believe things happen for you?
Yes, 100%. And I've learned to adopt that, instead of, because I never want to be seen as or regarded as a victim. I've always been like that. I mean, yes, do I have moments where I'm just you know what? I don't want to be a self-aware, evolved life coach for 5 minutes. And I want to be a victim. I want to not know any better. And I've had to take that on and give myself permission to just throw out everything I know and believe and just really feel and be in the mud. But I won't build a home there. I won't stay there for too long because I can't. I'm just not. I've rewired my brain to go on and to find the meaning and find the silver lining and have the hope. And, I always joke, I want to buy real estate on Rainbow and Unicorn Island. I just do. And, I know that it's probably too expensive for me right now to live there, but I'm going to keep trying. I'm just going to keep trying because I'm also somebody that has a hard time navigating her way through this harsh, negative, fear-based world. So I try and hold on to the beautiful parts of the world and the amazing things and the stories we don't hear about on the news because they're just too dang positive. Yeah. That doesn't sell.
It's true.
Right?
Very true.
I think a lot of what you just said really resonates with the work that we do. We deal often with grief, and whether it depends how, depending on how the person died, but sometimes people have a chance to prepare for it or they don't, they know someone's dying or they don't. But something that we always tell people is that grief is something that you can't go over it. You can't go under it. You can't go around it. You just got to go through it. And it's really hard. And it sounds so simplified to say it like that, but the way you say it, like you're in the mud and you just got to get through, and we're here to give you the tools and to help you through it. You're not alone. And I think that's really helpful for people to know that there are people that will be there in every step of the way. But at the end of the day is they can't get from point A to point B without doing the work and getting there.
Well, and it's so true. And, thank God for people like you and the organizations like you, because like it is really hard. And it's exactly what you said. I always say, like, the only way through is through. And you're going to experience pain regardless. It's the pain of not dealing with it and repressing it. And that's going to manifest in the physical and emotional issues and relationship issues. So there's going to be pain there, or there's going to be pain to face it and feel it and relive it and all of those things. However, I believe that when you face that pain, there's hope on the other side of that. If you don't deal with it and you repress it and you deny it and you avoid it, the pain is forever.
And it comes out when you least expect it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we can't run from pain. We have to just learn how to cope with it and to move through it, to give the hope of the other side. And the other side is you still feel it, but it's dulled, at times. Look, his birthday is also in May. So I have the anniversary of his death and his birthday, both 5 days apart. So, at the time of this recording, like, we're now in June, but it's a tough time. Like, May is very loaded for me, right? It's loaded, but I also, and it's been 2 years. So I would imagine that next year will be different and the year after that will be different. It's not like, and last year was very different than this year. So it's not like you forget. It's not like you don't have days. And for me, it was the day before the anniversary was harder for me than the day of the anniversary, because I think it was the anticipation and all of that. Right. But I'll speak for myself. My experience is, because I've done the work, because I faced it, because I continue to feel all the feels, good, bad, everything in between, I can face it and I can get through it. And I know that it's a little easier every time, and when it's not, it's not. And I accept that too. And I've stopped like judging it and analyzing it and trying to find meaning around it. Sometimes it's just, you're mad because you're mad, and you don't have to always seek a reason. You just feel it. And then it's like when a kid is tantruming, let them tantrum, and then they get exhausted and they're over it. Right. So just tantrum and then get over it. I don't mean get over it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't mean like get over grief. I mean, like, move forward. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know if you're going to ask about the son.
I was, you can, if you'd like to.
I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I'm just curious to hear, well, first of all, thank you for sharing about your experience, how you managed it, and what was it like for your son? 14 is a really difficult age for any boy, even living in the most normal circumstances. It was hard, and having a father die by suicide is really challenging at that time.
Yeah. It's hard to say. I mean, he is such a beautiful soul. He is so resilient. He is, on one hand, I say, okay, yes, it's a really tough age because he's a teenager. He's going through his own stuff, his own feelings just about life and, being a teenager and fitting in and all of that. So I think that, and I thank God truly that he has an incredible group of friends, and he has a lot of them, and they supported him. They rallied around him. And I don't even think they did it, with the intention of, because of this. They would have done it anyway, and they do it anyway. And they're such a close group. So I think that really saved him. we don't talk about it that much. We have a little bit. I made him go into therapy for a little bit, even though he was resistant. And normally I wouldn't force therapy, and he's not doing it anymore. And even though I would love for him to talk further about it, he's not in a place where he's going to accept the help. So, and to be honest, he's doing amazing. And that's why. So I don't force it on him because he's thriving. He's now almost 17, which is crazy. I mean, he was 14, his birthday's in August. So when it happened in May, he was like almost 15. So he's going to be 17 in August. He has a job. He's doing amazing in school. I don't know how, because he doesn't go in half the time, but God bless him for a photographic memory. Yeah, I know. It's like all the other kids hate him, but like, it's working for him. So fine. He's back at the summer camp where my husband worked. He went last year. He did amazing. He's first year staff. So it's like,
is that weird?
That he's staff? Going to be staff?
Going back to the same camp?
No, he did it. Well, no, he went. Okay. So when it happened in 2021, it was in May. My son was scheduled to go to camp that summer. He went for 3 days, couldn't do it, came home. Obviously makes perfect sense. The reason why I put him in therapy was because he really wanted to go back, but I felt like he needed to do some work around going back and having a successful summer and being there, because my husband was that camp. Sure. He is in every corner of that camp. And I think my son was probably worried that he was going to be looked at differently. He was that kid. Is it going to be a summer full of tributes and just that's really hard, or it's really, and then have everybody look at you. Like, I don't blame him. Yeah. So I made him go to therapy, just more for, let's try and get you to have a successful summer, and less about, let's talk about daddy, because he needs to get there on his own time. So anyway, he went to camp last summer. It was his sit summer. He had an incredible time. He thrived. So this summer, he's going back as staff. He wants to go. I'm not worried at all this year because he made it through last year. Yeah. So has it impacted him? I'm sure, of course, but I don't think that he's really allowed himself to go there yet. Not to say that he hasn't had moments, or, we've talked about it a little bit. And Jack, actually on the anniversary of my late husband's passing just a couple of weeks ago, I didn't want the day to come and go where it wasn't acknowledged. But I also know that if I approach it and my son doesn't want to talk about it, he's going to shut down. He's like me in that way. I need to get through it in my own time, in my own way, in private. And then when I'm ready, I'll talk about it. But that took me over a year. And I have life experience and a lot of training behind me. I can't expect him to be ready. So he maybe have grieved in his own way on his own time, but, I made a photo album and I wrote him a really long letter and explaining what I wanted to say and my thoughts, because I knew that if I went to talk to him about it, he'd shut down. This way, at least he can look at it on his own time. We don't have to talk about it. Or we can. I left the door open, but I'm also respecting his process. And he knows that he can talk to me. And that's really all I can do right now, because, and I say this because I'm not seeing any red flags, right? Like, he is doing so well, knock wood, thank God. Not to say that it won't catch up to him when he's 25, or when he walks down the aisle, or when he has a son of his own. Right. But until that time, I'm looking at it as, I have my finger on the pulse. I let him know that I'm here. He wants to just be a regular teenager right now and live his life. God bless you.
I feel like a lot of this with you being a life coach has just kind of jumped into place here and taken over in how you're managing the day-to-day or the recovery of dealing with such a trauma in life.
Yeah. I would say that's, I think it's a lot of that. I think it's just perspective and beliefs that I've picked up along the way. And just kind of innately who I am and what I believe and my values, and also just knowing who I am and what I need, and knowing my son and giving him the respect to do this in his way and on his time. And, you can't force somebody to do the work if they're not ready to do the work.
No, absolutely not. So it's one of the harder things to do, and to realize and recognize what needs to be done and actually put the effort forward towards getting to that point that you need to be at, to be ahead of it instead of staying underneath it. It is one of the harder things in life for people to actually do.
Absolutely.
Like, I know, to say there was a point where it was, I don't want to say it was a fad, but like life coaching just blew up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it really came through. And I know, like, I was kind of diving into that. I was diving into the whole mindfulness process. I was diving into self-understanding and actualization and making changes in my own life about myself. And to have that feeling and have that intuition that you seem to have and carry, and just have that empathetic ability towards people in general, especially to your son. I mean, to know that you can't push him. You got to hold him where he is. You can't push him. Just guide him along is all you can do for him.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will help him come to the realization of when he needs help, you are there for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's very hard as a parent. It's also hard as someone who likes to be in control, to allow somebody to have their own journey in their own way. Because again, as a parent, all you want to do is make sure your kid is happy and healthy. And you know that something like this can bring the strongest person down, and you want to protect, them from feeling hurt and all of that. So my natural instinct is to want to push him to get the help, to want to nip it in the bud and make sure that it doesn't come back to bite him. But when I did that, it didn't work. And it made him shut down even more. And I know that if someone did that for me, I would react the exact same way. So I had to look at it and be like, okay, my need for him to get better, of course, is because I want him to get better. But it was also my need to know and feel safe and comforted that he's okay. And I can't have that. It's just it's just that fear of the uncertainty, the discomfort of not knowing how it's going to turn out. And none of us have that.
Right.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say grief is really personal. There's no right or wrong way to grieve, and things change. So what I always explain to people is that it's great if he looks like and he seems like he's doing great now, and that's wonderful, but it's not a one-time conversation. So people will be like, no, I checked him out with my kids. They said they're all okay. And that's wonderful, but it's an ongoing conversation, and different things is sometimes going to be what's going to trigger it and have them feel like really the loss will hit them, or something will be they'll start really missing that parent that passed or that sibling. And sometimes it's big things that you expect, like the milestones, the graduations and the birthdays and the weddings and the anniversaries. So sometimes it is those things. And sometimes it could be as basic as the sensory things, like you're walking through the mall and somebody who walks past you is wearing the perfume your mom wore. And all of a sudden the person just has, just bursts out crying. So it's and that really catches people off guard. So I think understanding, and the more that people can anticipate that grief comes and goes and it's not a constant, and, giving the kid permission, you're allowed to be happy and daddy would want you to be happy. And that's something we talk about a lot, is allowing kids to feel the feelings in an age appropriate way and at time, and things change, right? It's an ongoing life process. So it's not a one time, grief, we're packaged all up, we're good, finish grieving. Now we can move on.
Wouldn't that be lovely, huh?
Right. So just for people to understand that it's ongoing, and that doesn't mean that, you could move on and somebody can get remarried, and that doesn't mean they ever stop loving the person that their first love. And, it's ongoing. And also a grief a spouse has for losing their partner is very different than the grief a child has for losing the parent, right? Every relationship is so different, and the connection is so, and it's a grandparent losing their child. It doesn't matter the stage, but every interaction, every relationship is so specific that no two grief looks the same, even if you're mourning the same person.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Can we talk about imposter syndrome?
Sure.
And the reason I bring this up is because you brought it up in one of your episodes, and I find it very intriguing because a lot of people speak about imposter syndrome in different ways. I can't remember if it was after the death of your husband or before, but you were going through a hard time and you were at a meeting or a conference and you said something, somebody rebutted you, and something triggered you at that point to feel that you aren't who you are.
Yes. Yes. I struggled with imposter syndrome basically throughout my entire career, as a life coach, as somebody who was building a business, and I always felt less of an imposter syndrome when I would coach people about their life, because I felt really confident in being able to speak to that. Where I felt like an imposter was when I was building my business, and one of my coaches at the time told me to just shift my focus, and instead of doing life coaching, to do business coaching. And I was like, well, I don't know much about business. And she's like, well, you do, because you're building a business, and you could just change the focus, because all the mindset stuff that you're teaching people applies to business. And I was like, oh, you know what? You're right. Like, self-doubt is self-doubt, whether it's about your body or your business or your relationships or whatever. It's the same things. Or, focusing on the negative, or, or like a scarcity mindset or whatever, like that could all totally be applied to business. So I was like, okay, great. I'm a business coach now. Teaching the same things, just slapping on a different label. I felt like an imposter because even though I was confident in what I was teaching and talking about, for whatever reason, I felt like, because in my mind, I hadn't made it as a business owner, like I hadn't reached the 6 figures yet or whatever it was. I felt like, who am I to talk to people about building a business when I don't even think I'm successful? Right. So that really played a big part, even though I believe that when you're coaching or teaching somebody, there are some days I felt like I was just 2 inches further along than the client I was working with. But I know everything, whether or not you practice it, or, and I really believe that I live by what I teach. I don't just spew out a bunch of theories that I read in a book. I'm somebody who puts it into practice and sees I have to know that it works before I can sell anything.
Sure.
So, but that's where I used to feel like an imposter, is how can I teach somebody to build a business when in my mind, I didn't think I had arrived yet as a business owner.
So the reason I'm asking, because I'm also wondering, how much does imposter syndrome kick in after the loss of your husband and dealing with your kids and going through grief and everything, from the standpoint of a life coach?
So for me, it didn't kick in at all, because now, if anything, and I'm not a grief expert, and I'm not at all somebody who wants to build a career around talking about grief. And, I just did it how I know how to do it, based on my intuition and the tools and strategies I've learned along the way. But I didn't feel like an imposter, because I felt like the fact that I am living it and experienced it gives me justification for talking about it. And so for the first time, in a very long time, and again, I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I feel like I've sort of dropped that, because I think everybody has their own experience, and your own experience and how you deal with it or don't deal with it gives you the right to talk about it. and to share it. And whether or not people resonate with that or buy into it, that's up to them. But you have the right to share your story in your way. And that makes you the expert of your experience.
Beautifully said. I couldn't agree more. I'm wondering something. So it was so untimely, very unexpected, obviously, the loss of your husband. What happened immediately after that? What started going through your mind? And what was your support system? Who came by your side? Who was there to help you through your day to day and every day you woke up, and to help you get out of bed in the morning and look after your dog and your kids and the mortgage and payments and bills and everything?
Yeah, it's a good question. I am very, very blessed. I'm blessed with a loving and supportive family. I have a lot of friends who are incredible. I feel like I have an army around me, and my son does too. And my friends are friends with him, and he texts them, and he's also got great friends. And so immediately after, I mean, I think I called my parents. My mom came over right away. Obviously I was in a daze, I was in a fog, I was going through the motions. But I also knew that, after the funeral and after the initial, I wouldn't even say the initial shock, because I'm sure I was in shock for longer than I think I was.
Yep.
I'm also somebody who has anxiety. And so for me, a pending task creates more anxiety. I'm not somebody who can have a pile of things that I need to do and not do them. That creates more overwhelm for me than if I would just put my blinders on and just plow through.
So you weren't a procrastinator in school.
Well, yes, school, I was definitely a procrastinator, because when it's things I don't care about or don't understand, then I'm I don't care. And I work better under pressure. But for life things, or just things that I know have to get done, non-negotiables, I have to get it done. And so, but there was a lot that, and I knew things, I paid bills and I paid the credit card, we delegated. He had things, he dealt with the mortgage and the car payments, and I did other things. So it wasn't like I didn't know how to write a check or do online banking, but I didn't know where everything was because he did some of it. Right. And so, and there were just things like banking and mortgage. I've never been super confident in finances and math and all the things. And so, I just didn't do that stuff. And now I had to, and there were insurance claims and forms. It's amazing how much actually has to get done that you wouldn't even think about. And thank God, my brother helped me with the banking things, and he dealt with the car lease. And I have another amazing friend, and he's in insurance, and he helped me fill out all the claims. So I put my blinders on and I got to work very quickly because I needed to do that for me. I'm not saying that's the only way. Some people don't want to do it that way. And I really dealt with the business side of death very quickly. The will, the insurance, the payments, all of it. Needed to get things over to my name. And, and it takes time. I'm still almost 2 years, over 2 years later, still dealing with certain things, not everything, but certain things. It just takes time, and it's a lot of red tape and a lot of things. So
sorry, also, but sometimes the logistics, I think being busy with that stuff is almost a helpful.
Yes, it is.
Keep moving forward. You have no choice. Your kid has to go to school. So
yeah,
you have to pay the mortgage bills, certain things. Sometimes the real life things that you have to get done are almost easier to deal with than the real emotional pain of it all.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And that's a good,
right?
there's
the practical, and then there's the practical logistics that have to get taken care of. And then there's the other stuff that is easy to push aside, but it sounds like you've done an amazing job of not letting that happen and really addressing those things as well.
Yeah. And it's also an incredible distraction, right? Exactly. To not have to deal with your feelings.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're doing, then you don't have to feel as much.
Yeah, exactly. And I also, at that time, I decluttered my house and got, I wanted to just create a different environment. And like, I knew I wasn't going to move, but I renovated a little bit to just, and so for the first, I would say 7 months after, I was doing all of that stuff and I was distracted. And yes, I still felt the things, but I was busy. I had things to do. I just kept my head down and I kept going. And it wasn't until like January of 2022 when the renovation stopped, everything was handled. And now I'm like, oh, here I am. Here
Calm
it
after
is.
the storm.
Yes. And this is when the feelings and the work and the pain and the quiet, and it's winter, and at the best of times, like I'm not a winter person, so I find it dark and depressing and all of that. So that was a really, really, really hard. That's when it was really hard for me, was when everything stopped. And, like I said, I have amazing friends, and, I have a dear friend who took over the Shiva. Like, she produced the Shiva, and it was amazing because, it's obviously not on the grieving person or family to do that, but it was also during COVID. So she had like a window of an hour for people, like 10 people to come, and then they had to leave, and like, or like she just managed that. And then there was like a food train and like meal train or whatever. And, it's all those little things that you would never ask for, but you really appreciate when they're in place. And, so I was very lucky to have, and I still do have, amazing friends and family. And I'm not an asker. Like, I'm a better giver than I am a receiver, but I've had to learn to ask for help and to accept it, even though I'm like, no, don't worry. Like, but no, like, people don't know what to do and they want to do something. And what I've learned is to just gracefully say, thank you, even though it might be hard. It was for me, but to just be like, okay, thank you. Yes, I accept that.
Do you have any practical tips, let's say do's and don'ts? Like, people will often call after there's a death and say like, what can we do to be helpful? Or people will give out these offers like, let me know if you need anything. And what I always try to direct people, like, be specific, say like, I'm dropping off dinner. Do you want pizza or chicken fingers? Like, be specific, because if you leave it open-ended, it's very hard for people to accept it, and they'll be like, okay, yeah, sure. Do you have either, practically speaking, any do's or don'ts of what was helpful for you or for your son in this time, like this tremendous time of pain and grieving, either like practically or emotionally, or things, or something someone said that really was hurtful, or, any do's or don'ts, what worked and what didn't?
Well, I think what you just said was something that I was going to say. Like, instead of asking, and I know everybody's intention is good, but that just gives the person or me another decision to make, another thing that I have to think of. And I will shut you down because I don't know what I want. I don't even know what I want. Right? Like, so what you said is so right. Like, you're not going to get it wrong. Like, just do something. Like, if you want to do something, say, I'm going to go walk your dog for you, or here's dinner, or, I'm doing this grocery shop. And again, like, I still turned people down for that. I did. But instead of leaving it open-ended, be very specific. Also, I would say, respect where the person is at. So if they just need quiet time and they want to not talk, don't take that personally. Don't, force it. Sometimes, like, I'm somebody who would rather be by myself than have somebody sit next to me and rub my back, right? Other people need that. I don't. And so I think often people feel so helpless and they want to do something, but then they make it about themselves to feel comfortable, and like, just like respect where the person is at, and really listen to what they're saying or not. And also know, like, there are some times where you're like, no, you know what? I know she's never going to ask for help, but I can sense that she needs me right now. And that's just in a comfort of knowing somebody. And, but yeah, I would just say sometimes just like giving the person the space to just be is enough too.
Right.
But everyone's different, right? So Everyone's different, and what they need may be different.
Yeah.
In one of your episodes, it's a little bit woo-woo. You spoke about talking with a what do you call them?
A medium.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
How did that go for you? What was
Well,
it?
I
What
went
was
to
the-
see
what was the
4.
experience like? Four.
I saw 4 at different times, and it's weird because the first one that I had scheduled, if you go to a good one, they'll book like months in advance. So I booked this one at the recommendation of a girlfriend, and at the time Mark was still alive, so I didn't even know why I was booking it. But I ended up seeing her in July, which was 2 months after. So yeah, and then I saw one in October of that year, and then November, and then a year later of November. So like this past November. So they were all spread out. And for me, I mean, I've always believed in a higher power like God, universe. I talk to my angels. I have crystals. I'm the weird one, I'm the weird one of the group. But I've always just believed in something bigger, and you can call it whatever you want. And so, and I used to be that teenager back in the day, going to Yorkville, getting the palm reading, wondering when I'm going to have a boyfriend, all of that. And that to me is different. That's just like, someone looking to make $20 easily. But this is different because every experience, every conversation that I had in all 4 of them, they didn't know me from anybody. They didn't ask any details. And Mark came to all of the readings, and I knew that it was him, and that I wasn't communicating with him, but the medium communicates with him, and they tell me what's going on. And I don't know how you can doubt, if you have to have the experience yourself, but there was, without a doubt, I knew I was talking to him. They captured his essence, his personality, the way that he would joke, certain things that we said about each other. They wouldn't have known. It's impossible. You can't even Google it, even if you wanted to. Because these are personal conversations that you have when no one else is listening. And what it did for me was it brought me a tremendous amount of comfort. It brought me peace. It brought me closure in many ways, because I did a lot of unpacking of what I thought happened and why I thought it happened with my husband's best friend. And we talked about it a lot. And I felt like we kind of were getting it right. It just felt right, what we were saying about it. And I felt through the medium, I got confirmation on what our thoughts were and our theories were. And it brought me a lot of comfort and peace, and knowing that he's in a better place, and that he wants me to move forward and my son to move forward. He wants us to be happy. And so, not that I felt like I needed his permission to move on. I just say, you know what? It's nice to have. It's nice to have. But it wasn't stopping me from moving forward, because I also knew that like I didn't do this and I didn't deserve this. And like, I didn't have any of that. I didn't have the guilt around it. But it was nice to sort of have his blessing, So for me, it was a lot of comfort.
Amazing. It's beautiful. We do have a couple more minutes before I get kicked out of my room I'm in right now. Either of you have any last comments or anything you want to share before we call it? Any last words of wisdom to anybody who might be dealing with similar tragedies?
I would say definitely if it's something that is traumatizing and that's preventing you from moving forward, definitely research EMDR therapy and see if that feels right for you. And if it does, I recommend doing that sooner than later, because for me, that allowed me to then have the neutrality to do the work and to feel the things, but to really sort of put that part of it aside and now just like deal with the emotions and the grief around it. And also give yourself permission to be exactly where you are in any given moment. So feel what you're feeling. If it's happy when you think you should feel sad, feel happy. And if it's sad when you think you should feel happy, feel sad, and don't judge yourself and don't censor yourself, and surround yourself around the right people who are going to allow you to be exactly where you are with unapologetically. I say that a lot in my podcast. Just be unapologetically you. And if you don't feel that, then find different people.
Yeah. I think one last thing I just want to highlight that I think is really important that you're sharing a lot about is not all grief is traumatic. There's always going to be, it's always sad, it's always tragic, but it doesn't have to be traumatic. And I think the fact that it's very important how you identify and distinguish between the two, because EMDR is wonderful and an excellent tool for someone dealing with trauma. And it's used in all types of trauma, not just around death. Any type of trauma, EMDR can be very effective, whereas that wouldn't necessarily be the first modality of approach to go to somebody with regular grief, somebody who was sick for years and the family had a chance to say goodbye. EMDR wouldn't necessarily be the first, type of therapy. So I think it's really interesting and important that you're highlighting that there's grief and there's trauma, and they two definitely, there's often times where they overlap or they intersect. We have a whole world where we talk about complicated grief. Sometimes the person who dies, you didn't have a good relationship with them, or the last conversation you had was a fight, or things, there's things you didn't get to say. So grief, people kind of generalize it. It's very complicated, and there's a lot of nuances and specifications to how to best work with somebody who's grieving. But yeah, I think it's really important to actually face the trauma part first, and you can't really deal with the grief until you've worked through the trauma of, especially in a case like what you've experienced. So I think that's really interesting for others to understand.
Sure. Yeah.
Really quickly, where can people find you?
So my podcast is called So That Just Happened. It's anywhere you'd find a podcast. I have a website. It's new and I'm improving it. It's called thecarlycooper.com, www. And I'm working on a few things. So just, you can also find me on Instagram at Coach Carly, Facebook, Carly Cooper. Yeah, I'm around.
Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. Everything you've said is very eye-opening, very transparent. I appreciate everything that you have spoken about and shared, and our condolences for your loss and for the fact that you have to deal with any of this tragedy and everything you have to go through and the grief of it all. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Really appreciate your time.
All right, my friends. Thank you so much for listening to this So That Just Happened podcast. I really hope you found value in this episode and that you're walking away with at least one golden nugget that you can implement or feel inspired by. I would be so grateful if you would share it with one friend or family member who is committed to moving forward and transforming their life. Make sure you subscribe so you can catch every new episode, and please leave me a review. It would mean so much to me. Also, follow me on Facebook and Instagram at @CoachCarly. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.